Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I rise, of course, as a member of a political party represented here, the only political party that actually owns its own island, Eilean Mor Vicar Cormac, which is off the coast of Argyll. We got gifted this, I think, 30 or 40 years ago. And over many years, members of the party have gone and started to rebuild the one building that's on there. But it doesn't count for very much. It's not a populated island. It's not economically valuable. But I'm going to propose that actually, economically, our islands are the most valuable part of Scotland. Now, that might seem a sort of slightly challenging and interesting thing to say. We think of the islands, of course, as soaking up our resources and being subsidised by us. If you think about it in a different way, the contrary view is true. And the most valuable island of all, uninhabited as it is Rockall. And why is Rockall so valuable? Because its existence as part of our territory is responsible for our having about a quarter of our offshore economic area. And with other islands, it gives us, I'll come in a minute, it gives us opportunity to harvest the seas, the fish that are there, and of course the oil. Mr. Whiteman.
Andy Whiteman.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Does Mr. Stevenson claim that Scotland should have sovereignty over Rockall? It's a disputed territory, and it was also the last, most recent act of colonialism by the British government.
Stewart Stevenson.
I think when Rockall came into the UK, I will be corrected if necessary, in 1956, I think it was, if I recall. But I think de facto it is accepted, it creates. But I make a general point that every part of Scotland makes as a unique contribution. And we shouldn't forget that the islands have their own unique contributions they make. Now, the Minister referred to a visit to Raasay, a sun-kissed island. I must say my visit there, which was thoroughly enjoyable, my greatest memory is the midges. The population of Raasay, of course, remember, with some horror, Dr. Green, who owned the island and kept the whole economy and the whole island in thrall. And that, of course, was repeated elsewhere. On Gia, when Malcolm Potter owned Gia, the island could not make progress. So islands have been one of the areas where management buyouts, community buyouts, have transformed prospects. South Uist would be an example. The island of Gia would be another. For my part, I've just done quick arithmetic. I appear to have been to 20 populated islands. That's far from the whole panoply of our islands. And my father was born and brought up on Eilean Mor, which, of course, really isn't an island, because in English we know that as the Black Isle. So not all things that are called islands and islands, Harris and Lewis being examples of that. But many of the characteristics of bits of the mainland are also the characteristics of islands. Now, I want to talk a wee bit about transport, because I've got some particular hobby horses I want to just get off my chest, and in particular in relation to aviation. Many of our islands are served by small aircraft that use motor fuel. They use petrol, avgas as it's called in the trade. It is vatable. So the island services in the Orkneys, the Shetlands, out of Oban to the islands, they have to pay VAT on their fuel. And that's inherently unfair, because the big aircraft don't pay VAT on the aircraft fuel. And that's an issue we should look at. Similarly, we have restrictions on the aircraft types we can use to serve our islands, and that makes it more difficult to expand air services. Unlike Norway, where single-engined aircraft can operate full services in instrument conditions and service very small communities, that is not permitted in the UK, even though the American aviation authorities show that the safety records of single-engine aircraft under a maximum take-off weight of 4,700 kilograms is better than the safety record of multi-engined aircraft in that category as well. I think, unless the presiding officer... Right, OK.
David Stewart.
The member for allowing me to intervene. I understood that CEA were actually changing the regulations for single piloted planes, which would have a benefit to the Highlands and Islands.
Stewart Stevenson.
There's an already exemption for single-piloted planes that applies in both Orkney and Shetland, that the CAA, and indeed that's helpful, but single-engine plane would transform the prospects of some places not in the network. Conscious, presiding officer, of your strictures, let me just take a wee bit of issue with Donald Cameron. The issue of Highlands and Islands enterprise and Scottish enterprise, he sees gloom, I see opportunity. I'm the only constituency member where both Scottish enterprise and Highlands and Islands enterprise operate in my constituency. And believe me, the people in the SEs, oh, I beg your pardon, I'm corrected, Mr Gibson as well. And the people in the Scottish enterprise bit want to be in the HIE bit. If we can transfer some of the culture and practice of HIE to Scottish enterprise, we'll end up in a much better place than we've been in the past. I don't think it's gloom and doom. And of course, I will campaign for the board meetings and headquarters to be in Inverness, not Glasgow or Edinburgh.